Hi, I'm John Cowan, and welcome to another session of Parenting in Your Bubble. And I'd like to talk today about children who cope, children who have extra springs in them that are resilient, and especially during stressful times. And maybe it has been stressful for you lately. You have my sympathy. So, how do we give kids a little bit of emotional resilience and toughness? And so just going to talk, there's lots and lots of things, by the way, that contribute to resilience. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of topics today. And as I always do, I like to qualify it with the idea that I don't know your kids. This is an unusual way of communicating in that I don't get to talk to you. And so I'm not getting feedback about how things are going at your place. And so maybe this is going to hit the nail on the head. Maybe it'll hit the nail on the side. But who knows? There might be something useful in what I've got to say. Now, this is a phrase I got from Dr. Sylvia Rim a couple of years ago when she was in New Zealand, actually a long time ago, and it really stuck in my mind that an indulged child is as miserable as a deprived child. Now, she was probably just exaggerating because there's some very, very sad deprived children, but what she was saying is that we do our kids no favours if we indulge them and can supply them with everything whenever they want it, and it sort of counteracts something. And I'm sort of throwing this up here because I'm going to talk about a few things that might touch some of you as being, oh, is that being kind? Yes. If you're building something more resilient and something that's going to serve them for life, then yes, you have to be able to tolerate sometimes a little bit of their discomfort and their frustration. Anyhow, what I'm talking about is things like boredom. A little bit of boredom is actually something that stimulates curiosity and creativity in children. Your job is to be a parent, not the entertainment officer. When the people are on holiday, some people think they have to furnish their kids with entertainment all the time. My suggestion on a vacation, a normal vacation, not just one of these lockdown sessions, is divide the day into 3 parts: morning, afternoon, and evening. And if you provide entertainment for your children on one of those 3 sections, one of those 3 parts of the day, you're being a fantastic, fun, loving parent. So you don't have to fill up every moment with entertainment. And you also put limits around just the default of dropping into video games. The requirement sometimes is that they have to entertain themselves. You provide the means of that. You teach them games. You teach them ways of occupying themselves. But it's okay to say to kids when they say, "Oh, I'm bored," you can say, "It's okay to be bored every so often." Or you can say, I sometimes get bored too, and then I go and try and find something to do to entertain myself. So much better if they can learn to entertain themselves. So a little boredom is okay. What about tears? Handling tears. Could I just say that tears do something to a parent's heart? I can remember with my first child, when my child cried, it just about broke my heart and made me panic. And so this is something that we need to learn to handle as parents. Tears, by the way, are meant to do that. They're meant to elicit something in a parent's heart to make us act. It's one of the only ways that a child has of communicating. And so it triggers within us empathy. Now, empathy is feeling a little bit of what a child feels. And if they're distressed and they use tears, then we feel distressed. Well, actually, that's a useful thing. We're tuning in on our children. Empathy is actually one of the most lovely things about being a human, being able to feel what someone else feels. And so the thing is not to be too perturbed by tears. I know a lot of blokes get very, very upset by the emotion that they feel when their children cry. And could I just say, a lot of us men have a more limited emotional vocabulary. We don't understand some of the more subtle emotions that flicker around, and we too readily label any strong emotion as just anger, and so we get upset by these feelings when our children cry. And so we need to understand our own emotions a little bit to be able to handle our children's emotions. Anger at tears is actually empathy with the wrong label. You're feeling the emotion you're supposed to feel, but you haven't labeled it with what it's supposed to be. So you do attend to your children's tears. You do attend to your own emotions. And you try and work out what's going on here. My child is distressed by something? Are they hungry? Are they fearful? Are there sickness? Are they in pain? Are they tired? Are they uncomfortable? What are they trying to communicate? And so that's our role. If we fail to connect with our children when they're upset like this, we run the risk of jeopardizing that most wonderful of things, attachment. And attachment is when children sense in their big person in their world a reliable, loving, caring relationship. And if they don't sense that, if they don't get a response when they need it, then they can detach from us, and the downstream consequences in their mental health and ultimate happiness can be quite profound. I might talk about that at some stage. And so the first thing to do when a child cries is respond with your heart. If it's something's rising up inside of you, well, go with your heart and act lovingly and wisely. As I say, for a baby, it's one of the few ways they have to signal that they have a need. Okay, what about when they cry a little bit later on through frustration? Now, this can be a little bit different because there's going to be lots and lots of times in their life when there's going to be a gap between what they want and what they're able to get. And this is true for us as adults. Part of maturity is learning to handle sometimes we might have to wait, we might not be able to get it all, some of the things that we want, and that creates frustration. And so, unfortunately, one of the lessons of becoming a more mature person is learning to handle frustration, and our children need to handle it as well. So because there are going to be these gaps between what they want and what they can get, they're going to feel frustration. And sometimes we are going to be the source of that frustration. No, honey, you can't have an ice block because we're going to be having tea soon. No, you do have to go to bed now. Actually, these chores do need to be done before you can play your video game. We set boundaries and limits on our children for their own good. And sometimes that will frustrate children, and sometimes that will well up in tears. How do you respond to this? Well, the emotion is real. And so you don't reprimand them for the emotion. And so you don't argue with them either, because if you're setting this boundary for really good, loving reasons, then hold your ground. You don't need to back down. If it's really quite a fair and loving thing that you're doing, you don't need to back down. But so could I urge you, perhaps the best thing you can do is actually sympathize. Actually sympathize. Oh, that's frustrating, isn't it? I know that you really wanted that lolly, but no, it's no lollies at the moment. And so you can sympathize with them and make sure that they realize that it's them coming up against the situation, not them coming up against you. It might be them coming up against a rule, but make sure that they realize that it is against the rule, not against you. So you can sympathize with frustration. Again, don't get angry with them. Sometimes a weep is what a child needs to do. A weep can sometimes be a way that they reset their emotions. They really, really wanted to go over to their friend's place and play, but they can't go because they're in shutdown at the moment, and they can't go. And you would be less than kind, less than loving if you did let them break those rules. And so, no, they do have to stay here, and they may need to have a little bit of a weep to grieve. This is what we do as humans. When we lose something that we're really wanting, when we can't get something we really wanted, we grieve, and they need to grieve that. And so sometimes a weep is a self-comforting tool to reset their emotions, and you can empathize with them. You don't need to jolly them out of it. You can actually just give them some words. Oh, this is frustrating, isn't it? I do feel sorry for you, but even though I can't change my mind on this. And so, I know you're upset. Acknowledging their emotions and sympathizing is possibly all we need to do when it's a grief over a frustration. Tears of pain. Oh, that really stirs my heart as well. But some parents fear that if I give them too much of a cuddle, then they'll just sit here grizzling all day. I sometimes recall when my kids were little, you could judge how much something hurt by that silent gasp between the first and second yell. You know, that when they yell and then before the second yell, you think, oh, that really hurt. So after my kids hurt themselves, I would be hugging them and I get an idea of just how upset and hurt they were. And then I would say something like, 4 more cries, if it was really painful, or, 3 more cries, and then I'd count them down, 2 more cries. And you know what? They never got to 0 cries. They always finished crying before they had used up all the cries that I'd allotted them. And I'd say something like, hey, you've still got 1 more cry to go. And then they go, wah, in my face and run off and play. And it just sort of nudges them around to the idea of, yes, you've comforted, the pain's gone, the comfort's here, and now I can get back into engaging with whatever I was doing again. It's a way of, you don't hurry them through it, you don't rush them through it. And sometimes if you discover that the leg is actually broken and it's going to need setting and painkillers, that's not going to work. But what I'm saying is, rather than just having them settle into a bit of a grizzle for the rest of the afternoon, you can just sort of actually nudge them through that process and get them to a happier place. Kids who cope need a castle. And by that I mean, I'm talking more about the circumstances that we encounter when our kids are out of lockdown and back at school. And it means that home is a haven. It's a safe place where people are on side with them. If they've had trouble out there, they're not going to get trouble part 2 at home. They're actually going to get comforted and supported and backed up. And when you've got a castle, you can go out and face dragons. You can have adventures, and you get singed and you run back in and you pull up the drawbridge and you have a cuddle with mum. And so just cultivate that idea that home is a castle, a safe place. People are on side and sympathetic with them. But do you know what can really jeopardize that and let the dragons in through the basement window? Social media. Allow your children to have a break from social media when they get home. Times during the day where they're not getting pursued by their mates or their enemies right into their bedroom. And so do regulate that. But a safe place is great. Kids who cope need a hero. And by that I mean a big person in their world who's completely on side with them. Interesting looking at children that have had lots and lots of problems, challenging boys in particular. I read a book where it said they need a staunch ally, someone who can say to them, hey, like it or not, I'm with you on this one, kiddo, and you can't get rid of me. Meaning someone who, even though their behavior has become wild and unruly and reckless and everything, you're still there. I'm not going to approve. I'm going to even set boundaries and limits and consequences, but I'm not going to get burnt off by your bad behavior. And so you're absolutely loyal through thick and thin, available and dependable. And kids, even kids when they're going through trouble, need your presence. And so a big person who's on side with them, also giving them confidence, lending them courage. Now, I see some people that seem fearless. I watch these YouTube videos of people jumping off cliffs and batsuits and doing bungee jumps and things like this, and they seem fearless. And I don't think my kids could be wired to be like that, because they've got my emotions, and I at times am fearful and phobic and afraid of certain circumstances. But what I can teach my kids is, hey, even though I'm afraid, I can do the things I have to do. And so you might be a little bit afraid of flying. You may not like going to the dentist or the doctor. You might be afraid of needles. You might be, whenever you go to school to see a teacher, all your old fears come rising up. But you know what? As a parent, we need to be a hero for our kids, and we need to act bravely, even at times when we're not feeling all that brave. Kids who cope need jobs. Now, it's interesting. I saw a study of people that were very, very successful in business, and they claimed that that one of the most important things in becoming successful in life was chores. All these successful guys had chores. And actually, the study was all guys. I'm sure of successful women that'd be true as well. Why would that be? Because I reckon the real secret of success is doing the hard thing. That's what I've got written on my wall. Do the hard thing. And chores are hard. Chores aren't fun. You might be able to kid your 3-year-old into thinking that putting a plate in the dishwasher is fun, but after a while they'll realise, hey, it's just a chore. But chores teach resilience, they teach skills, they teach how to look after yourself, but they teach how to belong to a team. But this idea of actually doing the hard thing, of doing the stuff you got to do before you get on to the stuff that you want to do, it really is a key life skill. And so a little rule of thumb is if you do anything for your child that they could do for themselves, you're robbing them. You're robbing them of the opportunity of becoming resilient and resourceful and uh, missing out on that ability to look after themselves. And so consider chores life skills. I remember an expert on boys who came over from Australia, and he reckoned the most important homework that a boy could do at school, from school, is chores at home. And so just see that as being not some. It's not just cheap labour. It's not because you're wanting to be lazy, because you're going to find getting your kids to do chores is harder than doing the job yourself, and you could do it better than them. And it's going to take a long time, and they're not going to like it, and they might resist. But honestly, chores build something into a kid's heart, and it really is a key thing in resilience. Kids who cope have routines, and this is especially true for kids that might have had some challenges, might be recovering from an illness or a trauma, kids that might be have some spectrum issues. Routine is especially important. I remember after the Christchurch earthquakes, there were posters around town saying, "Get your kids back into routine." They were meaning things like homework and bedtimes. Why? Because it gives the kids an assurance of this is how life is meant to be. Especially if you've got a challenging, difficult child, the more of their life that runs on rails, the better. And so schedule in things. Let them have a wall. Let them see a wall planner where they can see that date on the wall where they're going to be going out with you, and having a play date. When they can see when it's their turn to have a sleepover or something with a friend. And the more that's predictable, the more they can see things coming up, and the better. And so could I really, really urge you, even if your children are still very, very young, you stick to bedtimes. They may not go to sleep at that time. They may just read by themselves. I'm a great fan of that they learn to self-settle by just reading and settling until they're willing to fall asleep. But you have a set bedtime when they have to be in bed, with stories and songs and just a little bit of a debrief of the day. You have set meal times, mealtime routines. I know it's fun to have meals in the lounge in front of the telly at times, but I would really urge you to develop routines where meal times are a fixed part of a day, where you meet around a table and you have a conversation. I could go on about meal times, but little rituals like that make life dependable, and they build resilience in your children. Kids who cope have routines. I would really urge you to get help if you're needing help at this time. There's helplines like the parenting helpline, but also help with your mental health as well, and also lots and lots of resources. This might be a good time if you're still in lockdown to cruise through some of the wonderful parenting sites that are out there, including the Parenting Place, which I worked for a long, long time, parentingplace.nz, lots and lots of articles and videos to help you with your parenting journey. Thank you so much, and my email address is there. Feel free to contact me if you've got any questions, queries, or things that you'd like to be included in one of these little sessions. Cheers.